This is a recipe for a healthier, economically stronger country. I urge a yes vote for the Inhofe Utility MAC amendment, and I thank the President and yield the floor. Thank you.
Madam President, I would yield myself 1 minute of my time to put into the record a couple of things. First, an editorial written by the very type of companies my friend Senator Barrasso mentioned, who say they're just fine with the EPA's new air quality regulation. And you know why? Half of the coal-fired utilities, the power plants have already made these adjustments. They are clean. And if it's up to Senator Barrasso, the other dirty plants will just keep on spewing forth the most toxic and dangerous pollution. So put that in the record without objection, if I can. And the other is a new poll that was taken actually in March of this year, which shows that 78% of likely voters have asked us to get out of the way and let the EPA do its job in controlling industrial and power sector mercury and toxic air pollution. This resolution of disapproval goes against 78% of the American people. They're no fools. I heard a second opinion. I got a third opinion. And my third opinion is that if you look at this poll, you understand the American people get it. They know the technology exists, and they know that these improvements can be made. They know there are jobs created when best available control technology is put in, and they are opposed to this kind of resolution that would roll back the clock and continue our people breathing in toxics. I won't yield because Senator Cardin is waiting, and I yield him 6 minutes, and then I'll be delighted to yield at that time on your time.
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me thank Senator Boxer for her leadership on this issue. And let me just invite my friend from Wyoming to come to Glen Burnie, Maryland, and see the Brandon Shores power plant, the 12,000 megawatt power plant in Maryland, in which is operating, not only operating, but is in full compliance with Maryland's healthy air law that is very similar to the proposed regulations that we're debating today. That power plant put in the investments, didn't close, made the investments so we have a clean energy source, and in the process, Madam President, created 2,000 jobs in modernizing that power plant. That's why we have many companies that support the regulation, because they know it's going to mean more jobs, including Ceres and American Boiler Manufacturers Associations and companies like W.L. Gore. So first, I want to thank Senator Boxer for her extraordinary leadership on these issues. I want to thank Senator Rockefeller for his extraordinary statement. I was on the floor and listened to him, speaking on behalf of the people of West Virginia. They're interested in a clean economy, good health, and jobs. I want to thank Senator Alexander for speaking up for the people of Tennessee, because he understands the importance of sensible air quality standards. I want to speak on behalf of the people of Maryland, on behalf of the families that I have the honor of representing in the United States Senate. This is the week that summer camp started, and some parents are going to have to make a decision when we have a day that is rated as a code orange or a code red because of air quality issues concerning ground level ozone, as to whether they're going to send their child to camp that day, knowing full well if that child has a respiratory issue, an asthma issue, as to whether that child should be outdoors during that day when we have these air quality warnings. If the parent decides to keep the child at home, they've lost that day of camp and the cost of that day of camp. They've lost a day at work because somebody's going to have to stay with the child at work, another day lost from work. If they send the child to camp and the child has the episode, he may be one of the over 12,000 children that will end up in our hospitals or emergency rooms as a result of dirty air that could be cleaned up by the passage of these regulations, the enactment of these regulations. And I know the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee will tell us chapter verse as to how many premature deaths, how many chronic bronchitis. These are toxics that are going into our air that cause cancer and neurological, developmental, and reproductive problems, primarily for children. It's particularly dangerous for them. And the source, power plants that have not put in the investment for clean air. This is doable. It's been done in Maryland and in many power plants around the nation. In fact, my state, concerned about our children, concerned about our health, passed the Maryland Healthy Air Act. And the mercury standards in that legislation is very similar to what these regulations would require. Maryland has reduced its mercury and its SOx and NOx emissions. We saw a reduction from the 22 level, 90% in mercury, 80% in sulfur dioxide, and 70% in NOx. It helped our economy, as I've already pointed out in the Brandon Shores work that was done. But here's the challenge we have in Maryland. Yes, this is important. Maryland's experience shows that an aggressive timeline is not only achievable, but it's also desirable. Power plants are capable of meeting aggressive timelines, and the benefits are unparalleled. Air pollution control protects public health and saves billions of dollars associated with medical costs. The Environmental Protection Agency is required to do a study, cost-benefit. How much cost for how much benefit? For every dollar of compliance costs, we save $3 to $9 as far as saving costs for our economy. That's a great investment. We like those types of investments. The Maryland experience also shows that we need a national standard to effectively address air pollution. Maryland's done what's right, but our children are still at risk. Why? Because air pollution knows no state boundary. We're downwind. We've done what's right, but our children are still at risk. That's why we need these standards. We showed that you can do it in a cost-effective way, creating jobs for our community. You can have a clean environment. You can have a growing economy. In fact, you can't do it without it. And that's what these regulations are about. As Senator Alexander said, we've been waiting 20 years for these regulations. We've been waiting. 1990, Congress passed the Clean Air Act. In 2008, our court said you can't delay it any longer. It's our responsibility to protect the public health. It's our responsibility to do what's right. I urge my colleagues to reject this resolution that would deny us the opportunity of protecting our public health. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Madam President, I heard the senator from California talk about 78% of the people in this country want to reduce mercury. I am part of that 78%. The problem is this bill doesn't address that. By their own numbers, the EPA says that the cost is around $10 billion. Of that, less than $6 million would be addressing mercury. So the rest of that is, in particulate matter, something that's already regulated under the Clean Air Act. I recognize the junior senator from West Virginia for 6 minutes.
Madam President.
Senator from West Virginia.
I rise today to speak in favor of the congressional resolution of disapproval that Senator Inhofe has filed under the Congressional Review Act to stop the EPA from implementing one of the most expensive rules in recent memory. I thank my colleague, Senator Inhofe, for introducing this important resolution to send a message to the EPA. I'd like to say a few words about the little state of West Virginia, who does the heavy lifting that helps this entire nation. We have mined the coal, we make the steel, that we have done just about everything that we possibly can. We have more people that probably serve percentage-wise in the military than any other state. We've given our all for this great state, and we'll continue to do the heavy lifting. But what we need to do is make sure that the EPA make sure that this government is working with us, not against us. Government's role is to be a partner, not an adversary, but an ally, and that's what we're asking for. We're asking to work with the businesses and not against them. We're asking them to understand our actions. Their actions will put thousands of hardworking Americans out of a job in the worst economy in generations. Don't raise electricity rates on the consumers who can barely afford their monthly bills today. And it's mostly our seniors and people struggling with their families trying to make a living. The economic realities is that the environment and the economy has to work in hand by hand. It has to be in balance. From the day I arrived in the Senate, I've been determined to stop the EPA's job-killing agenda, and this resolution of disapproval takes an important step to rein in this out-of-control agency. Let me explain this to you. Where I come from in the state of West Virginia, like most states, we do our rules and regulations through a legislative process. People have to vote. We don't give bureaucratic agencies the right to set policy. The people have given us that responsibility and that right for us as elected leaders to set the policy. And that's what we're asking here. We have this agency stepping way beyond its boundaries, further than our founding fathers ever intended, that's putting an absolute burden on the backs of every American. Along with a handful of other rules on the verge of being implemented or already in place, the utility MAC rule would cost the U.S. economy up to $275 billion over the next 25 years. According to the Electric Power Research Institute, and the utility MAC would cost 1.3 million jobs over the next two decades, according to the National Economic Research Association. On the issue of utility MAC, I have heard from thousands of West Virginians in the past several weeks. In fact, just yesterday, I had 45 of my constituents from Boone County, West Virginia, get on a bus, 756 miles, drive all day to get here to be able to speak to some of us, and drive last night to go back home. That's how committed and dedicated. Most of them had either worked in the mines, was working in some aspect of mining. People think just mining is just coal mining and coal mining only. It's not. The energy business is basically if you work in a battery factory, you work in a machine shop, if you work in any type of ancillary jobs, the ripple effect is unbelievable to our economy. If you work in a power plant, these people are scared to death because all they hear every day is they're going to lose their jobs because the government is going to shut them down and work against them. About 3/4 of the miners in the room had already been laid off because they're fighting for their jobs. They brought their family and children with them. They wanted to make sure that we could put the faces and real people with what's happening with the rules that we pass here. Mr. President, our coal miners are the salt of the earth, Madam President. They work so hard to provide energy for our country and to provide for their families. They don't want a handout. All they want is a work permit. That's all they've asked for. Now is not the time to pull the rug out from under them and make them worry about how they're going to pay their bills or feed for their family. Madam President, I believe this country needs to strike a balance, and I've said that before. Our lives are about balance. Every day you get up in the morning, you look for a balance in your life. You look for a balance in how government or how you run your business or how you can make a living. And that's what we need to find here in this body today. The EPA has truly gone too far. You've heard so many different testimonies about that. And that is why I'll be casting my vote in favor of this resolution by Senator Inhofe to disapprove of the new rules. And I urge all of my colleagues to do the same. Madam President, I truly believe that energy is an issue where we can bring thoughtful members together on both parties to work out solutions. Let me point to an important example. In the time I have served, I have learned that many of my colleagues know of West Virginia only as a coal state. They had no idea what we do and how we do it. So this past weekend, I wanted to make sure that they understood that not only do we do coal, we do wind, we do hydro, we do natural gas with the Marcellus Shale, tremendous find, biomass. We're doing everything we can. And we think every state should be held accountable and responsible to try to be energy independent and do it in the most friendly environmental way. So this weekend, I invited the leaders of our Energy Committee, Senators Wyden and Murkowski, a Democrat and a Republican, that spent a weekend with me to tour our state and to see how West Virginia's all-in policy for energy independence works. One of them will likely be the next chair of the Energy and Natural Resources, but I can assure you that both of them will work as a team, trying to find a policy that works for this country. You'll hear both of them say, one size doesn't fit all. We need everything, and we have to find the solutions for this. A comprehensive energy plan for this country, which brings me to our recent visit to West Virginia. They saw how we are already using all of the above approach. In the eastern part of my state, we stopped at Mount Storm. They saw a 264-megawatt wind farm. They saw a 1,600-megawatt coal-fired power plant with the most modern of technology that cleans up the air 95%. They saw it all. And when the wind isn't blowing, basically they saw there was no power generated, and especially in the hot summer or the cold winter. So basically what we're saying is that we're doing everything we possibly can. We will continue to. In short, Madam President, we saw a little bit of everything that can be done if you work together. I want to thank and I think it should be a bipartisan effort that we find a solution. We can't continue to keep fighting each other, and agencies can't continue to keep controlling what we're not legislating. If it hasn't been legislated, it shouldn't be put into law until we're able to evaluate it. I appreciate what's being done today, the bipartisan effort that we're talking about. We have our differences, but we can come together. I want to thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
Senator from California.
Madam President, I think that when the senator talks about balance, he ought to recognize that one-half of the coal-fired utilities have already made these adjustments, and they have reported to us with very little impact on electricity rates. I would yield 5 minutes to Senator Sanders.
I thank the chair very much.
Senator from Vermont.
Before I begin, Madam President, I have 5 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to,
Without
that
objection.
these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Let me begin by saying, Madam President, I suspect that I have the strongest lifetime pro-worker voting record here in the United States Senate. I want to create jobs, not cut jobs. And what Senator Boxer and Senator Cardin and others are talking about is creating meaningful, good-paying jobs as we retrofit coal-burning plants so that they do not poison the children of Vermont and other states around the country. So to Senator Inhofe and others, I say respectfully, stop poisoning our children. Let them grow up in a healthy way. Madam President, the Clean Air Act is set to cut mercury pollution by 90% using technology that is available right now. That would be good news, since the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say mercury can cause children to have, and I quote, brain damage, mental retardation, blindness, seizures, and the inability to speak, end of quote. We get exposed to mercury simply by eating fish contaminated with it. And we have seen fish advisories in 48 out of the 50 states in this country. Wouldn't it be nice if the men and women and the kids who go fishing could actually eat the fish they catch rather than worry about being made sick by those fish? Power plants are responsible for 1/3 of the mercury deposits in the United States, but Senator Inhofe's resolution would let them keep right on polluting. His resolution would also eliminate protections against cancer-causing pollutants like arsenic, as well as toxic soot that causes asthma attacks. Leading medical organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, the American Nurses Association, have said, and I quote, Senator Inhofe's resolution would leave millions of Americans permanently at risk from toxic air pollution from power plants that directly threaten pulmonary, cardiovascular, and neurological health and development, end of quote. That's not Bernie Sanders. That's the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, the American Nurses Association. Madam President, we are talking about preventing thousands and thousands of premature deaths. We are talking about preventing heart attacks, and we are talking about what is a very serious problem in my state, and that is asthma. Maybe Senator Inhofe would like to join me in the state of Vermont. I go to a lot of schools, and I ask the kids very often, and I ask the school nurses, how many kids are suffering with asthma? And many, many hands go up. So thank you very much. We do not want to see more asthma in Vermont or in other states that are downwind. You know, Madam President, we hear a lot from some of our Republican friends about jobs. Well, the truth of the matter is that if we are aggressive in cleaning up these coal power plants, we can create, and we have already seen created, many, many good, decent-paying jobs. In fact, if the utility industries will invest in pollution controls, we can create almost 300,000 jobs a year for the next 5 years, meaningful, good-paying jobs, making sure that our air is cleaner and that our people do not get sick. So let's talk about job creation, cleaning up our environment. And, Madam Chair, this is not just theory. I'm the chairman of the Clean Jobs Subcommittee, and we heard from Constellation Energy, which installed pollution controls at their 1,280-megawatt coal plant in Maryland that cut mercury emissions by 90%. This $885 million investment created at its peak 1,385 jobs on site at the plant for boilermakers, steam fitters, pipe fitters, operating engineers, iron workers, electricians, carpenters, teamsters, and laborers, just the kind of jobs we want to create. The American people know we have to rebuild our infrastructure. We can create jobs doing that. This is one of the areas where we can create decent-paying jobs and help keep our kids from getting sick.
The senator's time's expired.
Thank you very much. I would urge very strongly a no vote against the Inhofe resolution.
Madam President,
Senator
yield
Mulcahy.
5 minutes to Senator Risch.
Madam President,
Senator from Idaho.
Madam President, I come to the floor this morning to urge an affirmative vote for Senator Inhofe's resolution. With all due respect to my friend from Vermont, this is not a job-creating bill. Virtually everyone who's looked at that has said this will kill jobs. This will move jobs overseas. Everyone who's looked at this has said that it will increase the cost of energy for the American taxpayer. So it does two things. It kills jobs and it increases the cost of energy. Why would anyone vote for this? This is absolute foolishness. Today, Americans are concerned about jobs. They are really concerned about jobs. Everywhere I go, people ask me about jobs, they ask me about the economy. And today, we as senators have the opportunity to do something about that. This resolution, clearly, its failure and the implementation of the rule that the EPA has put in front of us is going to kill jobs and it's going to increase the cost of energy in America. It is going to do precisely what so many senators come to the floor and whine about, and that is run jobs overseas. If you're a job creator, if you're someone who is thinking of investing, if you're someone who wants to move the American economy forward, you look at every single aspect of it, and when you see something like this, and it isn't just this, it's this in a parade of never-ending rules and regulations that kill jobs and increase the costs for the job creators. These are things that clearly urge job creators to create the jobs in a place other than America. That's just flat wrong. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today primarily. What I'm here to talk about today is the way we're going about this. You know, the Founding Fathers did a really good job when they set up our government. Indeed, out of the thousands of governments that have been created over the years, all of which have failed, most of which have failed, only one has had the success that our Founding Fathers have had. They created a government out of fear of government. They didn't create a government that said, how can we do this? How can we do that? They were interested in keeping government away from them, keeping government away from their jobs, from their businesses, from their investing. That's what they want to do, and it worked for about 200 years. For about 200 years, the federal government left the American people alone. They left the job creators alone. Today, over the last 3.5 decades or so, the federal government has stuck its nose into every single aspect of our lives. And here we go again. What we have here is the federal government using its power, using its regulatory process to get its nose into places where it shouldn't be. This is the job of Congress. It is not the job of the bureaucracy of passing these kind of laws. This isn't a rule or a regulation as the Founding Fathers anticipated these sorts of things. Founding Fathers set this up with three branches of government to fight with each other so that they would leave the American people alone. And they said the job of creating laws, the job of creating regulations, the job of creating rules was the job of the United States Congress. Now, somewhere along the line, we've lost our way. Last year, the United States Congress passed about 2,000 pages of legislation, and that included the spending bills. Last year, the bureaucracy passed about 70,000 pages of rules and regulations that have the same force and effect as law. The Congress has lost the ability to pass the laws that govern conduct in the United States. Now, people will argue, yes, but Congress won't do it. Congress won't act. That's precisely the point. We were elected by the American people to act or not act as is appropriate. When we don't act, when we don't do something, it is just as important as when we do something. Indeed, I would argue many times more important. Well, that's what it's come to today, 2,000 pages versus 70,000 pages. You know, in Idaho, we had the same problem for a lot of years. In Idaho, it was the same way. The bureaucracy could pass a rule or regulation that had the force and effect of law.
Senator's time's expired.
Thank you. But we've changed that, and we've gotten it to where the legislature has full control of this. This has got to change. Congress has got to take back its ability to handle the law as it's imposed and the burden it's imposed on the American people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam President?
Senator from California.
I want to yield 4 minutes to the senator from Delaware who's been such a great leader on this, Senator Carper.
Madam Chairman, thank you very, very much, and thank you for your terrific leadership as well. While a friend from Idaho is trying to leave the floor, I just want to say the Congress did act. And what Harry Truman used to say, the only thing that's new in the world is the history we never learned or forgot. The Congress did act, reacted with a Republican president, a guy named George Herbert Walker Bush, who signed legislation, Clean Air Act amendments in 1990, passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate, and supported, as I recall, by those of us here that are on the floor today. A little history here. 1990 Clean Air Act says, look, there's problems with toxic air emissions. We're not sure really where they're coming from, but let's spend a little bit of time and have the EPA figure it out. And they spent about 10 years trying to figure it out. And in the year 2000, last year, the Clinton administration, the conclusion was reached that a lot of the emissions for these toxic air emissions, mercury and arsenic and heavy metals, acid gases, a lot of it comes from utilities. A lot of it comes from utilities. And the Bush administration, brand new, in office in 2001, said, well, let's go to work and figure out what to do about it. 5 years later, in 2005, the Bush administration said, here is a rule to deal with, not with the 70 toxic emissions, but with one, mercury, just one. And immediately lawsuits were filed. And the federal court said in 2008, what about the other 70? You didn't do anything about the other 70. Mercury, and what you did with mercury is a cap-and-trade system, which doesn't really work for mercury. And so the courts remanded it back to EPA, and they said, let's try that again. Senator Alexander, who's been heroic on these issues, and I have worked literally for years to try to make sure that the Congress provided some leadership, that we do reduce the emissions of these toxic air emissions and sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide as well. And frankly, there's not been an appetite here, or in many cases with our utilities, to actually support legislation. We finally gave it a real try, a great try, I thought, in 2010. My friend Senator Inhofe was part of the effort to try to get legislation enacted. And finally, I think the utility said, we would rather take our chances on an election in 2010, and we'll see what the election yields and maybe have to deal with the EPA. Well, we had an election. And now the courts are saying, EPA, you've got to rule on this. You've got to provide some leadership if the Congress won't. And the EPA has done that. And it's not like they're jamming it down anybody's throat. They said, Lamar and I offered legislation that said by 2015, there's got to be a 90% reduction in mercury. By 2015. What EPA has said, by 2015, there's got to be a 90% reduction, plus to address a bunch of other toxic emissions. But EPA said, states can automatically give an automatic one-year extension. And if utilities have problems with getting this done by 2016, they can apply for another 2-year extension. This started in 1990. It's 2012. You play out the string, it could be as late as 2018 to comply. In the meantime, the downwind states, including Delaware and Maryland and Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and a bunch of us who are out on the East Coast, we're downwind from all these states that put up this pollution in the air. We have to breathe it. We have to breathe it. Look, the technology exists to fix this problem. Senator Box said 50% of the states, 50% of the utilities have already applied the technology. It works. It's broadly deployed. Utilities, most of them, have the money to pay for this. If they don't, they have the ability to raise capital. And there are workers, there are tens of thousands of workers who would like to do this work. And the idea that we have to choose between a cleaner economy and a stronger economy and a cleaner environment, that's a false choice. It's always been a false choice, and it's a false choice here today. I want to commend, especially before I step down, I'm a native of West Virginia. My dad, for a short period of time coming out of high school, was a coal miner. And I care about I still have relatives back in West Virginia. I care a lot about the state and the people who live there. I want to make sure that we do something, whatever is fair to them at the end. I want to say to Jay Rockefeller, thank you for standing up for West Virginia and being a hero here today. Thank you very much.
Madam President, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the senator from Missouri, Senator Blunt.
Senator from Missouri.
Madam President, I thank the gentleman for the time, and I rise in support of this resolution. You know, we've only been able to use the Congressional Review Act successfully one time, and I think that means at some point we need to look at the Congressional Review Act because these regulations often don't meet the common sense standard, and this is one of them. Now, it appears to meet the standards that the President would want his regulators to meet. In fact, in January of 2008, the President, while running for President, said coal-fired plants would go bankrupt and electricity rates, he said later in the campaign, would necessarily skyrocket under his plan to tax greenhouse gas emissions and through what was then the cap-and-trade system. The House passed that system in 2009. Missouri utilities all went together, the rural electric cooperatives, the for-profit utilities, the municipal utilities. They paid for a study in our state, which is in the top 6 states of dependence on coal. That study indicated that the average utility bill would go up 82% in the first 10 years and double shortly after that. Now, you don't have to be a genius to get your utility bill out and multiply it by 2. And if that's your utility bill at home, it may be a utility bill you can't pay. If your utility bill at work, it may mean that your job is no longer there because the utility bill went up. But that House-passed bill would have had that result in our state, and 5 states are more dependent on coal than we are for utilities. The Senate then rejected the cap-and-trade bill, and thank goodness they did. But when they did, the President said that there are other ways to skin the cat, his quote, and he said other ways besides just an all-of-the-above energy policy. His administration has bypassed the Congress, bypassed the will of the American people, and they're clearly trying to do by regulation what I believe the Congress would now never do. Once the American people figured out that cap-and-trade and policies like that would have this devastating impact on their utility bill, about 50% of all the utilities from the middle of Pennsylvania to the western edge of Wyoming are coal-generated utilities. Once people figured that out and the impact it had on their ability to have a job and their ability to do what they need to do at their house, they just don't want to do it. The EPA, with this rule, has finalized a regulation that would require power companies to reduce emissions in a period that's just unrealistically short. A 3-year time frame means that in many facilities, power generating facilities, you don't reduce emissions, you close the plant. What this really stands for is an assault on coal and coal-based utilities. The director of EPA, Lisa Jackson, said, the administrator said recently that current challenges to the coal industry are entirely economic. That's what she said, entirely economic. I don't know how anyone who's paying attention to the EPA, to regulations, or to the price of coal could say that the problems are entirely economic. They're not economic at all. We have more recoverable coal than anybody in the world. We now think we have more recoverable natural gas than anybody in the world. By 2016, under the current EPA rules that are out there, plus this one, our utilities in our state would go up as much as 23%. For the average Missourian, more than that for people in some parts of our states, a 23% increase on your utility bill by 2016. The estimates are that by 2020, we'll lose 76,000 jobs because of that increase in utility rates. And, Madam President, where will those jobs go? They're not going to go to California or Massachusetts or somebody that has bills that are higher than ours today. They're going to go to places that care a whole lot less about what comes out of the smokestack than we do. Last year, in states where coal generated at least 60% of the electricity, customers paid 30% less in energy prices than states that use less coal than that to produce their electricity. And in our state, as I've said before, 82% of our electricity comes from coal.
Senator's time expired.
And so I would just urge my colleagues to vote for this rule that would, for the issue before us that would say we don't want to have this rule. We want to do the right thing, not the wrong thing. And I thank the gentleman for the time.
Madam President, could you tell me how much time remains on?
Republicans have 3 minutes, 47 seconds, and the majority has 12 minutes, 25 seconds.
Okay. I would take 6 minutes and retain that balance.
Without objection.
Madam President, we are faced with a resolution today to essentially repeal a rule that after 20 years in the making is about to go into effect. It would stop EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, from implementing the first ever national mercury and air toxic standards for power plants. Now, a little bit later, I'll talk about what mercury does to people. And let me assure you, it's not good. I will also talk about the other toxics that are emitted in these dirty plants. They're not good either. When I mention them, just the names will scare you because they are names like arsenic and formaldehyde, not good. And they're going into our lungs. And the mercury is getting into the fish. And people are getting sick. That is why this is such a dangerous moment if we were to pass this and stop the EPA from doing this. Because we know for every $3 that we invest, every 1 to 3, we are going to get back $9 in health benefits. So if you do the math and you follow the math, it's clear that this is cost-effective, critically important. Just ask a parent who has a child who is rushed to the emergency room with asthma whether they want this done. Just ask a utility, a coal-fired utility, that has made these improvements already, half of them have, and they'll tell you it hardly had any impact on electricity prices, and they're happy with it. So if this resolution were to pass and the policy behind it were to pass, it means that instead of rewarding those coal-fired utilities who are doing the right thing, we are rewarding those who haven't done the right thing and continue to spew forth these toxins. What is at stake? What is at stake? And I ask you rhetorically, I say to the people who may be listening to this, who do you trust more? Senators, politicians, or physicians? or the nurses. I think you should trust on these numbers the professionals who have looked at this. If this resolution were to pass and EPA is blocked from implementing this new clean air standard, we will see up to 11,000 additional premature deaths, 4,700 heart attacks, 130,000 cases of childhood asthma, 6,300 cases of acute bronchitis among children, 5,700 emergency room visits, 540,000 days of missed work. And again, the rule provides $3 to $9 in benefits for every dollar that is invested. Now, you're going to hear other things from the opponents of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, but the people of America are smart. They were just asked 2 months ago if they want us to interfere with the Environmental Protection Agency as they clean up the air, clean up the mercury, clean up the toxic soot. And they said by 78%, stay out of it, politicians, and let the Environmental Protection Agency do its job. We should thank the coal companies who have already cleaned up their act, not reward those who have delayed cleaning up their act. And again, you'll hear all kinds of horror stories. Just ask the utilities that have made these improvements. We have a list of them somewhere, but let me tell you that you will also hear that there will be lost jobs from this rule. When we know now there will be 46,000 short-term construction jobs as these plants become clean, and 8,000 long-term jobs. Now look at the utilities who oppose the Inhofe CRA. Austin Energy, Avista Corporation, Calpine Corporation, Constellation Energy, Exelon, National Grid, Next Extra Energy, NYPA, Public Service Enterprise Group, and Seattle City Light. Some of these have coal-fired power plants, okay? And they say, what are you doing? Let's keep moving toward clean energy. I asked you, do you trust politicians or do you trust those who I believe are unquestionably character witnesses in this debate? Let's see some of them who oppose what Senator Inhofe is trying to do today. The Catholic Health Association of the U.S., Evangelical Environmental Network, Franciscan Action Network, General Baptist Convention, General Conference of American Rabbis, National Council of Churches USA, United Church of Christ Justice and Witness Ministries, United Methodist Church, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Okay? That's who oppose what my friends on the other side are leading us to today, a repeal of clean air rules. Who do you trust? The politicians or some of these groups who strongly oppose this resolution? The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Association of Respiratory Care, the American Heart Association, the Lung Association, the Nurses Association, the Public Health Association, the March of Dimes, the Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Trust for America's Health.
The senators consume 6 minutes.
I would ask for another 2 minutes, and then I will yield and retain the balance. Here's the chart I wanted to show you on electricity prices. You've heard gloom and doom. Here are the facts. There was hardly any fluctuation in utility rates when half of the coal-fired plants made these improvements. Do not fall for scare tactics, because we know upgrading a utility is something that's got to be done. And it's built into the long-term plans of these utilities. Now, what poisonous emissions does this clean air rule address? I talked about it before, and in the balance of my time, I'll go through it again. But I'm going to just name these toxins: mercury and lead, arsenic, selenium, cadmium, chromium, benzene, formaldehyde, acid gases, toxic soot, pollution. Now, all you need to do is just listen to what I said, and you know you don't want to breathe this in. And you don't want to have fish that contains too much mercury, because it damages the nervous system of children and harms the brains of infants. And we know how dangerous it is for pregnant women and children to eat this type of fish. Last night we had Senator Whitehouse here from Rhode Island, and he was eloquent on the point. He had a picture of sort of it was actually a Norman Rockwell painting, and it wasn't a real painting, it was a wonderful poster. And he said, here's a perfect American scene of a grandpa taking a grandson fishing. He says today, in his state, they can't really eat the fish. Maybe they can once a month eat one fish. And in some of their lakes, they can't even eat any. This is wrong. This is pollution blowing from other places into the Northeast. Let's defeat this resolution. It's bad for the people of this country. I yield the floor, retain the balance of my time.
Senator from Oklahoma.
Ms. Reword the question that was asked by the senator from California. Who do you trust most, elected senators or unelected bureaucrats? I yield 3 minutes to the senator from Kentucky.
Madam President.
Senator from Kentucky.
You know, the question is pollution getting better or worse? From all the hysteria, you'd think, oh my goodness, pollution's getting so much worse. All measurements of pollution show that we are doing a good job and much better than we ever have done. Most of the emissions, the big emissions, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, they've been going down for decades. We're doing a good job with pollution. This rule's about mercury. Power plants emit this much of the mercury. Do you know that over half of the mercury comes from natural sources? Forest fires emit more mercury than power plants do. We already have 8 regulations at the federal level on mercury. We have a plethora of regulations at the state level. And the question is mercury getting worse or is mercury getting less? Well, for the last 5 years, the amount of mercury that's being emitted has been cut in half. If you measure mercury in the blood of women and children, it's getting less. If you say, what is a safe level of mercury in the blood, we're below that. If you look at populations that eat nothing but fish, the Seychelles Islands, they've found 0 evidence that mercury is hurting any of them. So when you look at mercury emissions, they're going down. So the question is, are we going to have a balance in our country? Does the other side care whether you work or not? You can do everything possible to try to eliminate this last 1%, but the question is, at what cost? Many are estimating 50,000 people are going to lose their jobs. Do you care if you have a job? Yes, we want to be safe, but there has to be a balancing act. The question you have to ask, is the environment cleaner or worse off? The environment is so much cleaner than it used to be. The rules in place are somewhat balanced and are keeping pollution under control. What we don't want to do is go so far over the top that we lose jobs. This new rule is estimated to lose 50,000 jobs. I think what we need is that the American people need to have a say in this. We don't need to give up that power to unelected bureaucrats who you can't remove from office. Let's let your representatives get involved to have more of a balance in the regulations, and I suggest that we vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President, Madam President.
I understand that our time has expired. I would ask unanimous consent that the Senator Kyle have 2 minutes.
Without objection.
Madam President, actually, I'll just take 1 minute. I know the time is short. I'll put my statement in the record, and I would at this point ask unanimous consent that the full text of my statement be inserted in the record at this point.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll simply say at this point that adopting this resolution is very important to prevent the implementation of a regulation which I think has clearly been established, does not meet the test that would be required for the promulgation of a public health regulation and fails any test of cost-benefit analysis. And therefore, I urge my colleagues to think about the effect on the industry, on the people of America, on the economy at this time, and adopt the resolution offered by the senator from Oklahoma.
I understand. 1 more minute. Madam President, let me just clarify a couple of things. First of all, several have made comments about the Clean Air Act. I want to say I was very supportive of the Clean Air Act. It's done a great job, and I think that should be clarified. I think the other things that certainly we've had 3 medical doctors testify as to the health implications on this, and I would only say this, that if you were really concerned about what's happening to the on this thing, keep in mind what the senator from Alaska, Senator Murkowski, said. This maximum achievable control technology is just not there. So if you vote against this amendment and they allow this rule to continue, you are effectively killing coal in America that's accountable for almost 50% of our energy. I thank the chair.
President.
Senator from California.
Am I correct? There's 4 minutes remaining on my side.
Correct.
I would yield 1 of those minutes to Senator Pryor.
Thank you. I want to thank the Senator from California. I want to thank the Senator from California and just say that right now when you open the paper, when you turn on the evening news, you see these ads for clean coal. And we need clean coal. We're like the Saudi Arabia of coal. We have, they say, 400 years worth of coal supply in this country. And we have the technology now to take 90% of the mercury out and a lot of the particulates, and we should do it. This is our chance to do it. And this is a rule that's been 20 years in the making. This is not something that just people dreamed up here the last couple of years. This is something that's been 20 years in the making that Congress has mandated that we do this. And I'd say this in closing, for my part of the closing, is that we should not have to make ourselves a false choice here. We don't have to be anti-coal and pro-health. We can be both. We can do what's good for the health of the country and good for coal, and that is have clean coal, uphold this rule, and vote against the Inhofe resolution. Thank you.
Madam President.
Senator from California.
Madam President, Senator from Oklahoma said I asked, who do you trust more, politicians or bureaucrats? No, that's not what I said. I said, whom do you trust more, politicians or groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Association of Respiratory Care, the American Heart Association, Lung Association, the nurses, the March of Dimes, etc. I believe that when it comes to trust of the public, these groups have one concern, and that concern is the health of our people. That's why we have to defeat this resolution and allow the Environmental Protection Agency, after 20 years, to finally promulgate a rule that will go after the worst toxins that are coming out of coal-fired plants. I'm going to go through a few of these. Mercury. Mercury is a heavy metal that can damage the nervous system of children and harm the brain of infants, causing slower mental development and lower intelligence. Why do we want to take a stand against the children and their brain development? It can accumulate in the food chain, and we know this. What happens is people, especially pregnant women and children, can't eat the fish because of the high content of mercury. Then there's lead. These are the things we're talking about, getting out of the air. Lead can damage the nervous system of children and harm the brains of infants, causing slower mental development and lower intelligence. There is no known safe level of lead in the blood of children. This is indisputable fact. It can harm the kidneys and cause high blood pressure, damage reproduction, cause muscle and joint pain, nerve disorders. Why would anyone stand on this floor and say it's okay to allow these toxins to be polluting our environment? Arsenic, a heavy metal that causes cancer, damages the nervous system, kidneys and liver. Power plants account for 62% of all the arsenic pollution that we are fighting against. Why would anyone who cares about the people they represent vote for this resolution and stop the EPA from cleaning up our air? Vote no. There's no reason to risk the health of the American people for voting for the utility CRA resolution. If the resolution passes, and if that resolution were to become the policy of this country, Thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans every year will be harmed. This is not rhetoric. This is fact. Scientists have told us this. The health groups have told us this. I urge a strong no vote, and I yield the floor.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander. No. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. DeMint. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey.
I'll bet those doors are about to open.
Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Vitter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Coburn, Cochran, Corker, Cornyn, Crapo, DeMint, Graham, Grassley, Hutchison, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson of Wisconsin, Kyle, Lee, Lugar, McCain, Moran, Nelson of Nebraska, Risch, Roberts, Warner, Wicker. Mr. Blum.